Welcome to the Clipboard Home Energy Checklist created by the Heartland Renewable Energy Society. My name is Craig Wolf. The following is from a live webinar workshop with the Sunflower Community Action, an organization from Wichita, Kansas. What we will be doing in these next few videos is looking for the causes of the energy losses that we experience in our homes, and then we will look at how the checklist is organized and see examples of where these energy losses actually occur. Let's get started. So let's go through a little bit of Energy 101 in terms of what is energy and how does the loss of energy happen in a home. And so we have to understand a little bit more about the principles. So the first thing we're going to be talking about are what are the types of energy heat loss. And the first type of heat loss that we want to talk about is air infiltration. And air infiltration is enemy number one. And if you've ever felt a draft in your home, that is air infiltration. It's the air that seeps into the cracks of your home. And those are the things that when a professional goes after and try to make a home energy efficient, that's the area that is really a key focus of the professional and should be of the homeowner as well. Another type of heat loss are conduction heat losses. And what we mean by conduction is that's the heat that actually travels through a material itself. And that happens by molecules vibrating faster and faster as as one warm molecule touches the next molecule, it starts vibrating faster, and that's how heat travels through conduction, is by through a surface, is by molecules getting excited and moving faster and faster. So insulation then is one of those materials, because of all the pockets of air in it, that keep those molecules from being next to one another and vibrating. And so that's why insulation is a good insulator, because it helps stop those conduction losses. A piece of metal, for instance, is a very poor insulator because all those molecules are very, very dense. And so when you travel, when one side gets cold or one side gets hot, that heat is what travels through. In fact, heat is the only thing that moves in terms of conduction. In other words, the warm side will vibrate and it'll actually lose its heat going out to the other side. Another type of heat loss are convection losses. And this is if you had, let's say, a wall cavity that didn't have any insulation in it, you would get this kind of big loop that goes inside that wall cavity, where on the cold side the air would fall down and it'd go reach to the bottom, and on the warm side of that cavity the air would rise, and so you'd get this very slow convection loop that would help pull heat away from wherever it is, whatever surface is there, and then transfer that heat to the cold side. Another type of energy loss or heat loss has to do with condensation. And you'll see beads of condensation that form on a warm surface, and if there's enough moisture in the air, you'll see beads that form on that surface as the moisture that's in the air, when it touches that colder surface, can no longer hold that moisture, and so it forms condensating little bubbles on that cold surface. And so that's another way that we can lose our heat. And then radiation is another way that that heat travels. And so radiation then is energy that passes through space like sunlight. And when we get the sun's energy that comes into a home, what we want to try and do is keep that energy from going back out. If you've ever been next to a fireplace or a wood-burning stove and you say, man, that feels really good, that's because that's radiant heat that your body is feeling. In fact, that's one of the reasons why a solar home, a passive solar home, works well, is that you heat up the mass in the home in a passive solar home, and then that heat from that mass radiates and hits your body, and you're able to feel more comfortable at lower air temperatures with that radiant heat. I'm going to bounce back to what I remember what I was going to say on conduction losses. And if you're sitting in a metal chair right now, and that metal chair has wood on it and metal, and you take your hand and touch that metal, it feels cold. It feels cool. But then you move your hand and touch a piece of wood, and it doesn't feel nearly as cold. Well, those two surfaces are exactly the same temperature. What the difference is, and that's one of the examples of conduction heat losses, is that metal is a much greater conductor of heat. And so when your hand touches that piece of metal, it pulls the heat out of your hand, and you feel like, well, that's cold. But then when you touch wood, wood is not a very good conductor of heat, and you don't feel like it's a cold surface, but they're actually the same temperature. So I'm glad I remembered that, because that's an interesting way of looking at it. And by the way, I should say, if anybody has a question on anything as I'm going through this, yell at me or yell at Jeffrey, and we will answer the question as we go. So now we're looking at the 4 pages of the Clipboard Home Energy Checklist. And as you note that as we look through these pages, that they are divided into sections. And so that's how we figure a homeowner would go through this, by area of the house or by information. And so that's how we will go through this today. And so, but how and we may want to talk a little bit about this and get some feedback from you folks, but how will the Sunflower Community Action Organization use the checklist? Well, first of all, and do you all have a copy of it in front of you at this time, Jeffrey? Okay. So you'll always want to leave a copy, of course, with the homeowner that you're talking to. And it is my understanding that SCA will not conduct the analysis for the homeowner, but will provide them information so that they can conduct their own checklist of their home's energy features. But what you may want to do is to sit down with the homeowner and pick an example from each area, or an area or 2 or 3 or 4, and go over it with them so that they kind of have a handle of how to use the Clipboard Home Energy Checklist. And as you're explaining it, feel free to walk over and show them something that they can do, like with the draft detector tool, which we will look at here in a minute, and show them how to use that. Did I hear you start to say something, Jeffrey?
We had a question regarding what would be good examples to show the homeowner as we're giving them our introduction to the Clipboard audit.
Oh, anything you want to. I mean, anything you feel comfortable with that you think that the homeowner is going to grasp. So that's just totally up to you. And as we go through the checklist today, we'll be seeing examples of where each of these things are. And certainly the homeowner is going to have questions. And I want to let you know that if there's a question that you can't answer, say, that's a great question, and I will get back to you on that. And then you guys feel free to contact me either by email or by phone, and then we'll get back to you with what that answer is, and then you can make a connection back with the homeowner. So what are the areas of investigation? How is the Clipboard Home Energy Checklist organized? Well, these are the sections. We look at attics and crawl spaces, and then we'll look at wall insulation, and then because of how it's organized, we'll also look at basements and crawl spaces. We look at air infiltration. We look at HVAC, which stands for home ventilation and air conditioning, and fireplaces. Look at windows, look at water systems, look at lifestyle changes, and then look at landscaping and checking the exterior of the house. So how the homeowner would use this then is they would see the page of the checklist, and they would literally go through, and as soon as they go through an area, they would check it, and in the right-hand column, they would look and they would make their notations of what they found, so that after they do their go through their energy checklist, that they're able to remember what they saw, and so they could go back and kind of make their own game plan as to how they want to try to begin to address their home energy issues.